Good afternoon and welcome to Futuresoft's first Lunch and Learn. Lunch and Learn is a series that we started in 2020 and basically is our internal and in-house training sessions that we have on a weekly basis. So what we've decided in 2020 is to actually share these learning sessions with a wider audience, and we've continued to do so. So if you would like, you can also check out our YouTube channels. We have the recordings from all our past Lunch and Learn sessions on there. So today I will be talking about digital trends in 2022. My name is Nkemdilim Uwaje Begho, and I'm the CEO of Futuresoft, and I welcome you to the first Lunch and Learn of the year. A big welcome also to my team, who has relentlessly worked to put all of this together. So let's get started. In terms of, sort of the focus for today, we're going to talk about how digital marketing has evolved. We're going to talk about the digital customer experience and how data-driven strategies play a role in that. We're going to talk about strategic content marketing that is driven by PR, thought leadership, and SEO. We're going to talk about mixed reality, as well as, sort of the widening talent gap and the talent war that is slowly descending on us. So I will take questions at the end, but if you have any kind of sort of pressing questions as I go on, please put them in the chat, and then at the end I will answer all the questions. So let's start with the evolution of digital marketing. So we're going to talk about cross-generational marketing, the e-commerce evolution, as well as social support, which are all things that are really, really important when we look at how digital marketing is evolving, right? So digital marketing is no longer about putting out ads. It's no longer about, sort of just creating content and pushing it out. It's about so much more, simply because our consumers are evolving, the way that e-commerce or digital commerce is being done is evolving, and the role that digital and social support play is evolving as well. So let's start with cross-generational marketing. So everybody has probably heard terms like Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, baby boomers, right? Our Gen Zers are growing up and are seen as the trendsetters. And they have a lot of influence today, right? And they actually control quite a bit of consumer behavior. And they're creating massive, massive cultural shifts in terms of how products are sold, how buying behavior is evolving, and sort of, what a product means and the involvement of the customer within that product life cycle. Today, or this year, the oldest Gen Zers are 24. Right? So they are most likely already working, most likely starting to earn money, and most likely, getting ready to actually engage with your brands or buy from your brand. So this is a really good time to sort of figure out what is the messaging around that generation, what can we offer them, what are the products that we need to tailor for this generation. The oldest millennials are 40 this year, right? And I think sometimes when we talk about millennials, we think that they're super young, but no, millennials are, approaching middle age as well at this point, right? And we really need to start thinking about that, right? At 40, you probably have a family, you probably own property, you probably are building wealth, you're looking at how do I build retirement plans, you can consume more, products that are at the higher end, more premium, more luxury, is sort of certainly the taste that you are aspiring to and working hard towards, right? So how do you ensure that the communication is right? How do you make sure that you're speaking the language of a 40-year-old person? Then there's Gen X, right? So Gen Xers are in their prime, they're working, and they're earning more than any other generation. So this is really where, depending on the type of product or service that you offer, where the meat of your revenue may come from, right? So really thinking about who are these Gen Xers, how do we reach them, what channels do they actually, sort of engage with, and what kind of content do we need for them? Then there are the baby boomers, and they're getting ready for retirement or are already fully in retirement, which means they have a lot of time. It means that they are also able to, sort of really explore, when it comes to content, when it comes to experiences, when it comes to learning. So they're a completely different generation from your Gen X or millennials or from your Gen Zers. So it's important to, sort of really think about all these different generations, and especially for brands that have sort of people across all ages in their target market, you have to really think about how to cater to these different generations and their preferences. And, what messaging do you put out? What type of content, what type of visuals do they find attractive? What channels are they actually going to be in, right? All of these things are really, really important. And then there's something called retro content, which is basically, sort of all things made new. And we're seeing a lot of that in mainstream media, in movies, the Matrix 3.0, the new Matrix has come out. Space Jam has, sort of brought out a new version. Coming to America has brought out a new version. And these are things that a lot of the millennials and Gen Xers grew up with. And Gen Zers are now being introduced into this type of content that they're sort of like, okay, we don't really get it, but let's go watch the old parts, right? Let's really start to understand. Let's really sort of, and that's where you have this cross-generational mix of generations coming together, and nostalgia being created for some generations, and for some it's completely new and they don't understand some of the nuances within this retro content. But it is definitely something that we've seen, sort of start in 2021, and in 2022 it's definitely going to be something that's going to be really big. So really thinking about how does your brand leverage that retro content is very important. Now let's talk about digital commerce and how it's evolving. So digital is fast becoming, sort of the biggest sales channel for most retail brands anyway. And, also the way that we sell is really, really evolving and will continue to change in 2022. So digital commerce experiences, they're really changing, they're evolving, they're being optimized to help brands really increase their reach, increase their influence, and also influence the actual purchasing decisions. They're helping them build loyalty and trust, right? And how is that actually happening? What are the actual mechanisms behind that? So one of the trends that we've really seen is live stream shopping. And I think that this is something that will continue because video is such an important format and such an easy to consume format. Then there's social commerce where, that has been around for years, but I think when you look at how social media platforms are really strategically optimizing their platforms to enable social commerce and integrating payment gateways to make sure that social commerce, becomes a thing, that's, one of the areas that you really need to focus on. Mixed reality experiences, right? Where you can try things before you buy without actually being in a physical store, right? So really looking at how do virtual reality and augmented reality, what roles do they play in that commerce, value chain and in that, sort of purchasing experience. And then influencer marketing and influencer commerce is becoming more and more mainstream as well, where influencers are no longer just telling you, oh, buy this product, but actively selling the product and actively involved in campaigns, actively involved in conversations, actively involved in creating brand content that drives purchases, right? So the customer experience is becoming more and more important, and actually more important than your actual product or service, right? People have realized that, I can buy the same product or, go for the same service from different organizations and probably pay, very similar rates. But what does that really mean for me, right? What does the brand mean? What does that brand stand for? What are the things that are actually important to me when I make that purchasing power decision, right? Why will I buy from brand A and not buy from brand B? So the customer support and your consumer education that you're putting out there is paramount. the speed with which you do your responses, your delivery speed, all of these, can really set you apart. So when you're thinking about, sort of the digital commerce evolution, it's not just about the technology piece, and it's not just about what technology actually drives the purchasing process, but it's also about what does the consumer and customer experience look like? What does my consumer actually want? How educated do they need to be about my product, about the benefits, about my company, about me as the executive in order to make a purchasing decision? Digital support, so that's one of the key areas. So consumers are evolving, and it's no longer enough to list sort of like your support email and maybe a phone number, or on your social media, and then just say, oh yeah, well, we've provided a support channel and we'll respond whenever we want. Customers are expecting fast answers. They're expecting you to have multiple support channels that really fit into their lifestyle, right? Not everybody likes phone calls. Not everybody likes WhatsApp. Not everybody likes emails. Not everybody likes chatting on a DM, right? So you have to make sure that you're actually catering to multiple people across multiple support channels. So you really also then need to look at, what do I actually need in terms of a support team, and how do I make sure that I'm actually responding with valuable feedback at the speed of light, right? So a lot of the time you maybe call a support center and the person tells you, oh, I need to escalate this, and we will come back to you in 48 hours. That is the worst response that you can give, because it tells me that the person that you've put at your forefront to engage with me as the customer has no clue of what the issue is, how it's going to be resolved, and all they're there for is to basically be your gatekeeper, to tell me I need to wait longer, right? That doesn't work in today's world. So the type of customer service teams and the structures are going to change drastically as well. Digital support will also expand beyond just answering sort of the basic queries, right? And will evolve into using actively, and really increasingly using DMs, chatbots, and also providing personalized advice, right? So you have to make sure that you can transfer people to the technical experts that can actually help them and that can give them more information, because today's consumer is very educated, a lot of the time knows more about the issues that they're facing than you as the customer service person, right? So they are not interested in speaking to someone who has no clue and is just there to say, oh, we're sorry, we will look into it, right? That's simply not enough in today's world. So we really need to look at, how do you, sort of engage beyond that? Increasing DM interactions and social messaging platforms are going to help solve issues much faster. This means that you have to have a really digitally savvy, well-oiled and well-trained customer service team behind your channels. You also have to be proactive in your engagement, right? Identify the customer's needs, what problems they're facing, what the key customer service issues, what are the issues with your product, right? You need to be on it. And the only way to do that is to really monitor conversations, right? And to engage in those conversations, ask questions, look at, sort of common trends, and have data across all your support channels that show you what are the key things within your customer experience that need to be optimized. Now, in terms of recommendations for the evolution of digital marketing, I think the most important part is that the current marketing landscape really demands innovation and a lot of trial and error. So there's going to be a lot of testing, which means that you have to be super agile, right? In your marketing approach. You can't really set a, set a strategy and sort of think, oh, this strategy is going to work forever, right? A lot of the time, strategies now need to be reviewed, on a quarterly basis, if not even on a monthly basis, to make sure that they are really still up to date and that they're doing what needs to be done, right? So you have to also invest in your social listening to really understand what are the trends in your cross-generational marketing, right? So how does do these different trends across these different generations really drive your marketing strategies, right? And how do you create a unique customer experience and unique content, right, across content types, as well as content formats for each of these generations? Then you need to really also look at investing into the changing face of e-commerce, and really optimize your digital commerce experience across channels, customer support, as well as turnaround time, right? You have to digitize your e-commerce value chain and really look at how do you make sure that your customer experience is supported by content, agility, ease of use, and a human touch, right? Nobody wants to chat with only a chatbot and never have the chance to actually engage with a customer service representative that can actually help with whatever the problem is, right? Also making sure that your support channels are valuable, right? And when I say valuable, they need to leave me happy when I end the call and not just feeling like, okay, this was a complete waste of my time. And really and truly, why did I engage with this person that knows nothing, right? They have to be easily accessible and across channels, across different touch points. They need to be frictionless. And one of the platforms that we've really seen, especially when it comes to Web 3.0 and sort of the changing face of consumer and community engagement is a channel called Discord. So that's definitely one of the channels that I would recommend to look into for any brands. Now we're going to go on to the second part, which is basically talking about the digital customer experience and data-driven strategies and the trends that we're seeing here. So we're going to talk about Consumer 4.0, interconnected experiences, as well as conversations, humanization, and personalization. So Consumer 4.0 demands a more digitized communication with them and also a deeper relationship with your brand, while they actually have changed their entire purchasing mindset, right? Their purchasing mindset is completely driven by their beliefs. So it's really important that you have a digital presence, but using the appropriate platforms to communicate with your target audience is even more important, right? Your product and service are no longer the exclusive focus of the business relationship, like I mentioned earlier, right? So your brand is key. Your brand identity, your brand personality, right? And when we say brand identity, it's not just your logo, it's your communication, your visual brand identity elements, right? It is your social media, it is everything that sort of encompasses your brand, right? It is the messaging, it is the narrative, it is how you engage with your consumers. And that also really shows your brand personality. And those things are really, really important to consumers and can be the differentiating factor why I purchase from brand A instead of purchasing from brand B. In terms of product and service, like I mentioned, it's no longer the real focus, right? So your values are important. How well are your values aligned with mine, right? That is, and how well is also your thought process and the type of thought leadership that you put out there aligned with the values that I have. Consumer involvement is also really getting more and more important. So instead of just having purchase-centric relationships, consumers really want to be part of the decision-making and not just consume, right? And the truth is, if you listen to your consumer, right, whether you do that through social listening or focus groups, or you have feedback channels, or some other way of engaging with your consumer, you will learn so much about how you can make your product better, the things that really matter to your consumer. You will learn about customer experience issues that you have. So that engagement is key. So it's no longer a one-way sort of communication. It's two-way and extremely interactive, and will continue to be that. Community is also very important to consumers. They want to belong to a community and get added value for making a purchase, right? So whether it is belonging to sort of a user type, for example, anyone who, sort of Android users sort of have their own community, iPhone users or Apple product users have their own community, right? And there's a certain, sort of, I guess, status symbol or whatever it is, that also gets sold when you buy a MacBook Pro, for example, right? So because everybody knows that, first of all, it's super expensive. Everyone also knows that the quality is really, really good. Everyone knows that the experience in terms of what it comes with, what the system comes with, as well as how it's packaged is fantastic, right? So it's something that a lot of people aspire to. So joining that type of community is something that's really important for Consumer 4.0. Now, interconnected experiences are one of the things that we believe is going to be really, really big in 2022. So whether online or offline, the consumer is really expecting a frictionless customer experience that fits into their day-to-day lifestyle. Frictionless customer experience means that, you have good reviews. It means that there's quality in all areas, that there's agility, that there's speed, that there's ease in the customer journey, that you have multiple contact information, purchase, and support channels, right? So all of the things that we've sort of listed across, the trends that we've mentioned. But interconnected really means that you have to analyze how people go about buying things in this digitally integrated world and really tailor your customer journeys to it, right? So there's a whole ecosystem around me making a purchase, right? So it's not just me engaging with your brand content, right? I'm going to read your reviews. I'm going to look at product videos if you have any, or if there are any people who have put product videos out there. I am going to ask people. I am going to engage with your social media channels. I am going to watch whatever video content you have. I'm going to read blogs before I make a decision. And I'm also going to do the same for your competitors, right? So I'm comparing, which means that the content that you have out there, whether it is own content or user-generated content or some level of influencer or community content, it's important that you really think about how are those different experiences interconnected, and how do I, sort of make sure that people are going to make that say yes to purchasing, right? So the whole ecosystem that really surrounds a purchase decision has to be taken into consideration when you're creating these interconnected experiences. And the questions that you really need to ask yourself is, what's our customer experience strategy? So a lot of organizations think about customer support, but not customer experience, right? They may think about, user experience on a digital product, right? But not about the overall customer experience, right? And how the different channels, the different content pieces all play together, and how they, sort of form that entire customer experience. And also really thinking about what are the elements that actually make someone purchase. Then the second question you need to ask yourself is, who owns it, right? So it's really important that, there's someone who takes ownership for it. And then the last question that you need to ask yourself when it comes to the interconnected context is really, where do I get data from, right? So is there data within my organization? If not, how do I create that data? And how does that data and the insights that I get from the data actually support my interconnected context and these interconnected experiences that I'm trying to create? Conversations, humanization, and personalization. So your customer experience has to focus on service, not sales. It has to orchestrate engagement, not campaigns, and it has to be human and personalized, right? So you can see that the theme of customer experience sort of goes across all the trends that we're really looking at, right? So communication is no longer one way, like I mentioned earlier. Consumers want to be heard. They want to influence product development. So you have to have conversations, right? Brands have to engage. Consumers want brands that are human, brands that care, brands that support causes, brands that celebrate their own, brands that showcase the humans behind them, brands that engage with their stakeholders and communities they operate in, right? So the way that you position yourself as a brand is completely changing, because you really have to, first of all, engage, and then you need to be more human as well, right? So you need to show the people your values, your brand identity, and all of those things that are behind your brand. Data plays a big role in knowing your customer. So you have to go out with the generic and in with segmentation and personalization. And this is a trend that, we've talked about, I guess, for the past 2 years, but I think personalization is becoming more and more important, and also becoming more and more mainstream, right? Which means that if you have not thought about segmentation and personalization at all, then you're going to be really, really far behind at the end of this year, right? So it's important to really think about how do you segment properly, how do you use data, and how do you create, sort of these data-driven strategies that allow you to personalize your communication, your content, and how do you create relevance around what you put in front of each different type of consumer within your target audience, right? So we talked about cross-generational, consumers, and this is really where that personalization is so important, right? So if you are a financial institution and you have a children's account, for example, and you send out a message asking the child to take a loan, that is not personalized, right? Because it's just a generic message that you've decided to fire across your entire user base, as opposed to really thinking about who are the consumers and our clients that actually, are able, right, to take advantage of this offering that we have, right? Who is this beneficial for? And there are different, sort of factors and data points that go into that. Age is one of them, right? Account balance may be one of them, right? Previous type of transactions, credit history is probably one of those things that should go into that, right? So really thinking about how do you personalize your content and how do you segment your target audience. And then also really understanding that the technology that you're using or that you're going to use for this is really secondary. And it's really informed by the strategies, which really have to be 100% data driven. So your data, your insights, and really investing into analytics is, no longer a nice to have, but a complete must have in 2022. In terms of recommendations around this pillar, you need to sort of really look at your brand identity again, your values, your touch points. You need to update and optimize your buyer personas and customer profiles, and really think about how do you create those cross-generational personas and profiles, because each of these groups are significantly different and will probably consume significantly different types of products or services. You also have to invest in creating value add and community around your brand. So how do you create that? How do you make sure that people have bought into your brand, that they see the human side of your brand, right? Invest in your customer experience strategy and an interconnected customer journey. So how do you interconnect the different channels, the different content types, the different content formats, your content distribution? How does that all interconnect in order to actually get you or your consumer to a yes at the end of the day? Also investing in data that can give you consumer insights. So it's really, really important to make sure that data is not seen as a, and data and analytics are not seen as a cost point, but seen as an investment center, right? Engage and include your consumers in product design and customer journey optimization. Humanize and personalize your brand and your customer experience as much as possible. So really thinking about how do we showcase, all the people that work behind the scenes, all the people who make it possible for this product or service to exist? How do we showcase them? How do we celebrate them? How do we, allow the customers to engage with them? How do we make sure that the customers can put a face to them, right? So for example, in a couple of countries abroad, when you go on your online banking app, you can see the picture of your account officer, right? And that is such a big deal because it's such a simple thing to do, right? But then I have a face to the person that I'm going to call or text or engage with, especially if I haven't met them before, right? Which is the case in a lot of the time, right? So that is a way to really humanize the person behind the account management, right? And create a much deeper connection there. And then you have to really constantly innovate around your customer experience. So it might just be the right time to hire a chief customer experience officer. So we're seeing a lot of organizations really move towards that, where they no longer have, where they no longer sort of look at product in isolation and have a chief product officer, but also have a chief customer experience officer that looks at the entire customer experience in a holistic way. Okay, so now we'll go over to strategic content marketing, PR, thought leadership, and SEO. And we'll talk about search intent, the evolution of content formats, executive profiling, and multi-stakeholder management. So SEO is really evolving, and it's becoming more human-centric than algorithm-centric. And what we're seeing is that, organizations that provide these search services like Google are really, really focused on search intent. Right? So search intent is the reason behind a search. And it's really driving SEO rankings, and we believe that it will continue to do so. So Google really tries to understand what is the reason behind the search query, and then they categorize those reasons, right? So it could be an informational query, it could be a navigational query, it could be a transactional query, or a commercial investigation query where you're sort of comparing, the price or comparing features of something, right? So you could say, what is better, MailChimp or I don't know, a different mail service, for example, right? So really thinking about your content in terms of your content types, your formats, and the content angle, because they have to be designed in a way and optimized for this search intent, right? So you have to keep at the back of your mind, am I, with this type of content and the format that I've put it in, is this informational, right? Is it a guide, for example? Is it a how-to? Does it describe my product in detail, right? Is it a knowledge base? Or am I trying to get people to come to the right type of place, right? So how do you find, a particular restaurant, for example, right? So how does that navigational part play into my content? Or is it transactional, right? Are people trying to purchase, right? And then how do you make sure that you come up? So for example, the other day I was trying to find out how much milk costs, right? And I put in the brand of the milk that I was trying to purchase, and the size of the package that I was trying to get. And then I put in how much does the cost. And it then, obviously brought out different e-commerce platforms that sell this milk, right? So those were the top search results. So it's really important to really think about, is this transactional? Is it navigational? Is it informational? Or are people trying to compare, right? So if people are trying to compare, how do you, define your unique selling point? How are you, better than the other brands, and how you make sure that you really stand out, right? And this could be a comparison that, an influencer has done, or a review of, two different systems that has been done independently, right? So it's really important to really think about content in that way. So relevance and content are going to be the foundation of SEO success in 2022. And all of that is going to be driven by search intent. And as we think about that, right, we also have to think about how our content format's going to evolve, right? So only 19% of consumers find brand created content authentic. And this shift, is really towards belief-driven buying, right? So I have talked about belief-driven purchasing earlier, right? And what that means is that people want to believe in it before they purchase it, right? And that means that they want to read peer reviews. They are interested in word of mouth marketing, right? They're interested in, what do other users say about this product, right? Are other users by themselves posting stuff and saying, oh my God, this, is amazing, right? I love this particular brand, or, this particular shampoo makes my hair look really nice, or whatever it is, right? So if only 19% of consumers find your brand created content authentic, right? It means that there is, 81% of consumers that rely on other types of content and other types of information to make their purchasing decisions, right? So how do you ensure that your brand gets mentioned in this, right? So there's community content, so user-generated content, or UGC, and influencer content is becoming more and more important in attracting, engaging, and converting your potential customers. So you really have to look at, what is the strategic role of user-generated content in your marketing, and how is that going to evolve? Because in 2022, we're going to see more of that shift. And I believe that that 19% is going to get even lower, right? Where brand content becomes almost insignificant. It's a nice to have, but it's not really what will drive purchasing decisions. Micro content is also important, right? So our attention spans are getting smaller and smaller. They're actually shorter than the attention span of a goldfish. And this means that you need content that is bite-sized, right? People don't read. People like to skip things. People like to just scroll over things. So you need to put into formats that they can easily and quickly consume, right? So micro content will become the norm. It's already started, but I think in 2022, we're going to see it really take center stage. So it's time to really review your content formats and look at how you can create bite-sized content pieces that are quick and easy to consume, right? And a lot of the time, this may mean repurposing content that you already have. It may mean sort of re-looking at the channels that you use for the content. It may mean, using audio and video instead of written content or any type of, visual content. So consumers have really fallen in love with live audio. And I think, Clubhouse really pushed the live audio revolution and also pre-recorded audio. So in 2021 was the year where the highest number of podcasts were created, recorded, and consumed, right? And that's not going to change. So you really have to think about, how do I invest in audio, whether it is live audio, whether it is pre-recorded audio, whether you put yourself behind a session, that is being recorded as the sponsor of that session, or and sponsoring conversations in your sector or in your niche, right? Video is going to be the primary format of marketing, and it already has, sort of really taken over. But I think in 2022, we're going to see it really take center stage. And any brand that doesn't have a video marketing strategy and doesn't have, sort of content that is video-based content and is not creating content that is video-based content is going to be left behind, right? So it's going to be video, then blogs, then infographics. Those are sort of the key, sort of content formats that we're seeing, emerge, and where we really think that brands need to sort of start investing in that, because that also helps with the consumer education. It helps with making sure that you are addressing the cross-generational target audiences or target segments that you have. It makes sure that you are able to create that community content, and that content can easily be repurposed into micro content as well. And even for video, you could have a 1-hour training session about something specific, but you can cut it into bite sizes of 2 minutes. And there are a couple of brands that have done that, where they basically, maybe have, I don't know, stockbroking 101, right? Or investing in stocks 101. And then they, sort of break it down into 1-minute videos of, what is this stock? What is this? What does this mean? What is, what does profit mean? What does equity mean? And things like that, right? And you can then choose to watch the videos that are relevant to you as a consumer, right? Because you may not be a beginner, you may be an intermediate, but you may still have certain terms that you're not, that you don't know. And because you don't know those terms, you want to watch those videos, right? So instead of consuming an hour of content and wondering where in between am I going to find the content that's relevant to me, I'm now finding content that is extremely relevant to me. I can consume it in 2 minutes and I can be, educated, and I'm going to go back to that particular app and, probably invest in more stocks because I now have a deeper understanding about it, right? So those are some ways of really sort of, combining that, audio, video, micro content, and also figuring out, like, how do we repurpose that into some level of community content, right? Because that's a great way for people to also share, right? So I could share that and say, I just listened to this, 3-minute audio clip or a 3-minute video, watch this 3-minute video. And, now I have better understanding of whatever, so I think that's really where the future goes. And you really need to think about how do these different content types and content formats interplay, and how are you able to really, sort of leverage them in order to really get out of it what you want. Executive profiling and multi-stakeholder management. So in 2021, I think ESG, especially in the corporate world, has been, sort of the big buzzword where we talk about environmental, social, and corporate governance. And I think it will continue to rise, right? And with that, it means that stakeholder management is no longer about just your shareholders and your consumers directly, right? Communication, has to come from the top, right? Which means that CEOs are really being challenged to engage and give their brands a face, and most importantly, a voice, right? So stakeholder mapping and stakeholder engagement strategies are no longer nice to have. You need to understand who are the stakeholders across board, right? So not just who is my target audience, and what are the, buyer personas and profiles, but really to think about who are the stakeholders that I need to engage across board, right? So whether it's your regulators, whether it is the immediate community in where you have your business, or whether it is your actual consumers, or whether it is even internally the people who work for you, right? So really thinking about that and having a strategy behind that is very important. Every brand has to also have messaging pillars that shape their communication and narrative, especially at the executive level, right? So we're seeing that communications departments really are, beginning to focus, and I think this is going to deepen, about really how do they strategically position their CEOs and C-level executives for meaningful engagement with the various stakeholder groups, right? So executive profiling strategies are very important for any brand that really wants to win when it comes to PR, community and stakeholder engagement, as well as thought leadership, right? Because these are the executives within your organization that really know, they have deep industry knowledge, they're professionals, they're experts. So use the knowledge that they have, showcase them. It builds more trust. It makes sure that, consumers, first of all, also sort of see the humans behind it, right? So there's a lot of humanization behind it. It can, also open up conversations. And from, I think, 2020 onwards, we've really seen a massive shift in, sort of executive profiling, which is pretty much the same thing as personal branding, right? But it's specific for executives within large corporations or smaller corporations, right? And really positioning them to be representatives of the organization, but also showcasing, parts of themselves, their own characters, right? Because that's really what people want to know about. They want to know, who are you? What do you support? How engaged are you in ecosystem building, in the community? And how are you engaging with the different stakeholders that you have? So in terms of recommendations, it's important to review and optimize your content marketing strategy to really ensure that it's strategically positioned. It's strategically positioning your brand with regards to PR, thought leadership, and SEO, right? So thinking about search intent, really thinking about what are the pieces that we put out there, who do they talk to, and really thinking also about what role does thought leadership and executive profiling play for us when it comes to content marketing. Ensure that you understand the search intent of your target audience and develop content in line with it. Understand that the audience is already posting about you, and analyze what they post about in order to really leverage user-generated content at scale. And then also figure out, like, how do you encourage them, right? What are the incentives that people within your target audience or your consumer base need in order to actually post more, right? Some brands share, repost, or mention the people who post about them. They also, sort of sponsor conversations. They also, sort of celebrate or gift people that create this user-generated content, maybe products or an experience or something else, right? So it's really important that you figure out, like, how do you engage your users in order for them to create more user-generated content. Invest in micro content, as well as video and audio content, and position yourself for strategic content partnerships that can help you drive your content distribution. So it's not just about content creation, right? Content creation is great, but if you don't have a content distribution strategy that, sort of backs it up, then you're dead in the water, right? And you've put in all this effort to create great content and it goes only on your channels, then, the reach that you have is very limited. So you really also need to think about, how do you get a wider reach? How do you get more people to engage, to see your content? And how does that, what are the distribution channels that you can unlock? How can you create strategic content partnerships, right? So maybe you have a big brand, another big brand, and they come together and they create a really great campaign that is content marketing driven, whether it is video focused or audio focused, right? And by doing that, they're bringing together both of the target audiences, which means that you're actually expanding your reach significantly, right? So you also have to invest in stakeholder mapping, stakeholder engagement strategies, as well as executive profiling strategies. So those are really, really important in 2022. Now we'll go over to the fourth pillar, which is mixed reality. And I think that mixed reality really is becoming the new reality. So we're going to see more of hybrid experiences. We're going to see more of extended reality and immersive reality. We're going to really hear more about, the metaverse in 2022. I think, we're just at the brink where it's about to go super mainstream, and brands really have to think about, how do we play in this new world? So hybrid experiences are important, whether it's at work, events, conferences, or in retail. When it comes to engaging and communicating with your consumers and stakeholders, hybrid is definitely here to stay, right? So all your events and interactions really have to be designed with hybrid in mind, right? How do you make sure that you can purchase, that people can purchase and things like that in a hybrid world? Like, how do you make sure that people, can have the same experience without physically being present, right? How do you make sure that you extend your brand reach to almost a global reach by having hybrid experiences? So your events, if they're hybrid, they really have the ability to create transformative experiences. And they significantly increase your reach because people from all over the world can now participate, right? So you're not, sort of limiting people by location. And I think a lot of conferences last year, have really embraced hybrid, but I think that there's still a lot of room for improvement. There's also still a lot of room for really thinking about how hybrid allows you to increase your lead generation, right? So not thinking about hybrid from the hybrid experience part and the technology part, but really thinking about it from a marketing part perspective, and really thinking about, well, how does this help with my lead generation? How does this help with creating content? How does this allow me to also repurpose content into various formats? And how can hybrid experiences really become the foundation of my content marketing strategy, right? So it ties back into, sort of also thinking about what is search intent, thinking about how do I involve my executives and make this part of the executive profiling strategy, right? It also goes back to really thinking about what role does this play when it comes to thought leadership, what role does it play with regards to content formats, and what, how can influencers play a role? So it's really, really important to sort of not just think about, how do we create a good experience in regards to the supporting technology, but really also thinking about how does this help with your lead generation? And, the bigger picture, obviously, when you generate leads is your bottom line and your revenue, right? Data and insights will be what drive decision-making and trends around hybrid experiences. So the more data you have, the more you are able to really tailor your experiences and customize your experiences, to match the target audience, to ensure that maybe each generation has a different way of signing up for things, right? So ensuring that you are really using all the different channels and really thinking about that as well when you're creating these hybrid experiences is important. So extended reality, which is pretty much AR and VR combined. So AR is augmented reality, VR is virtual reality, and another term for it is immersive reality. So we've already spoken about generational marketing and how it's becoming more relevant. And we talked about consumer 4.0, but I think that there's a consumer 5.0 emerging. And this consumer is really focused on that immersive reality experience, right? They're influenced by interactive digital TV, by immersive reality experiences, where technology really enables the replication of human senses. So there's, for example, a TV that allows you to taste how something tastes, right? So you could lick the screen and actually get the taste of that thing, that, food or whatever it is, right? And this, I think, is going to play a really big role in, especially hospitality, so Epicurean, it will play a really big role also in food retail. It's going to play a really big role in, education as well, right? So you could teach a child that has never had an apple how an apple tastes without bringing a physical apple into the classroom, right? So it's really about, sort of new experiences where the human senses are awakened, and where you are in a space, but you feel like you're somewhere else, right? So commerce, I think, will be completely disrupted by immersive reality. I think AR and VR are becoming a core part of the customer experience as well, and institutional learning and development within organizations, right? And also, I think over time, as the technology gets cheaper, we're going to see it also become a key focus in sort of mainstream education. Gamifying the in-store experience with social apps will redefine the retail and commerce experience in the coming years. So campaigns need to be true to your brand identity and really resonate with your audience, providing them with some kind of value add and not just selling, right? So when you're gamifying these in-store experiences, right? So, and a lot of that is happening in the metaverse, where you can go into the metaverse with your avatar and you can purchase a product, and then that product will be delivered to you in the real world, right? So we're already seeing those type of experiences, and there are a couple of brands that launched that towards the end of the year. And I think that that's really going to become more and more mainstream, where it's fun, it's exciting, it's a completely different world. You can go in there anonymous, right? But still leave your details for delivery, right? And I think that creates a new experience, right? So you're having an in-store experience without being in store. And I think that really is where the new frontier of immersive reality is going to go towards. And then obviously I've mentioned the metaverse, right? So it's really, I think at this point we can say it's gone mainstream, and there's really a big shift that's happening, which will impact your digital strategy in many ways. So I think especially for, at this point, especially for retail and luxury brands, they're really quickly finding their place in the metaverse, and finding ways to connect with consumer 5.0 as well as early adopters, right? So last week, for example, Gary Vee launched a new restaurant and private members club in New York, and it was launched through an NFT, right? So you purchase the NFT, and with that you get the membership, right? And the NFT, and it's a fish seafood restaurant, so the NFT is just the picture of a barracuda, right? And it's super expensive, super exclusive, but it's the experience that you're purchasing, but you're purchasing it in a different way, right? So brands that are embracing how they, sort of integrate Web 3.0, NFTs, crypto into their experiences and into the purchasing process, right, are going to evolve more, right? And I think with that, consumers are going to start doing that, right? Because you're pushing consumers into this new way of doing things, right? So I think brands really need to look at how do they, how do you create your own experiences, right? Ethereum, I think, is going to be what will really drive the development of a lot of more applications, and Microsoft in December said that Ethereum is going to be, you know, sort of the foundation of the App Store of the future, right? Because that is really, there's so much technology that can be built on the Ethereum blockchain that, you know, you can't build on other blockchains. And they've launched Ethereum 2.0, which has lower gassing fees. So there's a lot happening in this space. And it's really important that, you know, brands start looking at this and really start thinking about this. Also, NFTs, like I said, they're no longer only digital art. They're playing a huge role when it comes to loyalty, rewards, exclusivity, especially in the luxury segment, right? So when you look at, you know, NFTs like Bored Apes, right, where it is not just an NFT, it is access to members clubs, it's access to exclusive parties, it's access to exclusive experiences that you would not have access to, which is why these NFTs are, you know, $200,000 and above. And, you know, we're going to continue to see value on digital assets and digital collectibles increase as they're tied to in real life experiences, in real life accessibility, exclusivity, and things like that. But one of the things that I think we really need to think about is that there's going to be a growing talent shortage around Web 3.0. There already is. There are a lot of efforts by the Ethereum Foundation, Cardano Foundation, to really pump money into building talent around Web 3.0. But I think that we're going to really experience a talent crunch as more and more brands go into the metaverse and start building for the metaverse. So the recommendations here are to embrace hybrid and build winning strategies around your event marketing and lead generation. Invest in mixed reality experiences, especially if Consumer 5.0 is your next frontier. Invest in developing expertise in everything metaverse, right? Which means that you need to sort of create a playground, right, where people within your organization or people that you recruit for this function can play around, can really start, you know, innovating around how do we engage with the metaverse. And I think this has to be really a diverse team of devs, of marketers, of you know, customer experience strategists and innovators that can really think about how do we create a metaverse strategy for our organization. And then also, how do we develop talent, right? Or acquire talent to ensure that you have the right skills required to build these mixed reality experiences. And then how do you involve your consumers to build these experiences with their feedback, right? So not just you go out there and create something, but also how do you, you know, sort of carry your consumers along? And I think this is where, you know, your Gen Z segment will play a really big role, because they are really at the forefront of early adoption, right? Obviously, there are millennials and Gen Xers that are playing really big roles, especially as creators and investors in this space. But in terms of consumers, it will definitely be that, you know, sort of younger segment that will drive a lot of it, and that will continue to shape the culture and you know, sort of the way that we think about all of this. And the last pillar that we'll talk about today is the talent war is just beginning. It's an employees market with global opportunities. There's hybrid work, new occupations, and a growing talent gap, right? And why is this important, right? You may say, oh, this is not really a digital trend, but I think it's actually really important because you need talent in order to implement any of these things that we've, you know, sort of talked about today. So it's really, really important that we, you know, sort of look at the talent war that is just about to begin. An employees market with global opportunities. So it's an employees market, especially in the digital space, with a widening talent gap. So whether it's around digital marketing, around technology, around customer experience, around any kind of agile or innovation technologies, Web 3.0, you know, XR, there is no talent in the market, right? Which means that we have to really think about how do we create talent, right? But it also means that for the first time in decades, the bargaining power is really shifting from companies to employees, right? So you are no longer the center of the universe, right? The employee really is, especially if they have the relevant skills. And that has changed a lot of mindsets, right? There are much more freelancers than we've ever had. There are much more, you know, sort of very small agencies and startups that are springing up that have these skill sets, right? Virtual jobs allow job seekers to also apply to global roles, right? So location is no longer a defining factor, which means that there are global opportunities, and these global opportunities come with, global pay in foreign exchange, and oftentimes also more exciting projects, right? So you really also need to think about, what can I offer if I can't match pay, right? Because the dollar to the naira, even at official rate is 480, which means that if a technology talent is really lazy and sort of works 100 hours a month, which is really little, they can earn $1,000 at a $10 charge rate, which is also very, very low, right? So we've already taken sort of awesome. That's 180,000 naira, which you probably can't afford, right, or don't want to pay, right? So there are many, sort of aspects to this, employee market, and really thinking about what do I offer, right? So employees are also moving from rigid corporates to agile and more flexible startups with exciting and fun cultures that foster growth and innovation, right? So they may earn less in those startups, but they have much more opportunity to grow. They have much more exciting cultures, and they have the flexibility that they're looking for, right? Culture and flexibility and value adds offered carry more weight than job title or pay. We're also seeing 4-day work weeks becoming a mainstream thing, right? So they're being piloted in the Netherlands, in Finland, in Scotland, in Japan as well, and in China. So, I think that it's something to think about. I don't think that we're 100% ready for this yet, but I do think that as this becomes mainstream globally, we really need to start thinking about how does this impact our organizations? What does this mean for our, operations as well? Retaining employees has become harder than ever, and this trend is going to continue, especially when it comes to really highly skilled talent. Hybrid works. So many teams are not willing to go back to 100% physical. And that means that people and culture teams all over the world are really trying to strike that balance and figure out what makes sense for both employees and companies. So when you look at the research, right, almost half of all employees, so 47%, would likely look for a job if their employer doesn't adopt a flexible working model, right? And especially for talent within the technology space, this is 100% true, and those numbers probably in the technology space will be even higher. Hybrid is definitely here to stay, so you really need to think about, are you going to enforce a rigid and forceful back to the office policy like many employers are doing now, because they're like, okay, we've had enough of COVID, everybody needs to get back to the office. But this move may actually increase your attrition rates, right? And increase your overall cost of human capital management, because it means that you need to recruit new talent, that is aligned with this, with these policies. And that may mean that you're not going to have the best type of talent. Hybrid models need to be tailored to the strategic goals and needs of your business as well. And they have to include key culture enforcing activities as well as learning and development initiatives, right? So I think this is sort of probably the biggest shift that we've seen in HR or people and culture, where those teams are really beginning to juggle more and more than they ever have, right? Which means that you also need to ask yourself, do they have the right resources? Do they have the right knowledge? Are they digitally savvy enough to really understand how hybrid works, or which hybrid model to choose, right? Are you going to choose a, sort of 2 days in the office, 3 days remote model, or a you can come to the office if you like model, where remote is, sort of the mainstream and office is optional? Or is it going to be, well, you should be in the office, but if there's anything specific why you want to work from home, you can work from home 1 or 2 days in a month, for example, right? So those are very different models, and create very different ways of flexibility, very different levels of work-life balance as well. So really thinking about that means that you really also need to think about retraining and retooling your HR teams. And what we're seeing as well is that big tech companies like Google and the likes are also supporting hybrid work with work from home allowances, as well as home and workspace allowances, where they give you money as an employee to buy a proper desk, buy a proper chair, put proper lighting in your workspace, right? Maybe buy some plants. So depending on which company it is, the budgets, sort of range from $200 to over $1,000 per employee. So these are things that, I think we really need to start thinking about as well, right? Especially if we do decide to go 100% remote or mainly remote, then you really have to think about how do you support your employees at home to make sure that they have the right type of environment where they can be productive, right? Or do you offer people to come to your office if they want, right? So this is really, a really big conversation around hybrid work. And I think that the overall business strategy, as well as, sort of your overall communication strategy really ties into decisions that you make around this. Then there's also, new occupations and a growing talent gap. So Meta, which is the old Facebook, is creating 10,000 new jobs across Europe to build the metaverse, right? So many of these jobs are with new or never before existing job titles and job descriptions. So that means that, they're really pushing, these new occupations, but there's still a growing talent gap. So even with all of these efforts that they're putting in place, by 2030, there's still going to be a deficit of 85 million tech workers, right? If there's no strategic intervention, which means that, especially in a place where, education is not necessarily the best, we really have to start thinking about how do we create, sort of pipelines? How do we create, our organizational structures to really accommodate these new roles, right? What role does innovation play? What role does agility play? Are they second nature? Are they part of our culture, right? How are these roles going to evolve? What are these new roles? And how are they going to be created, right? Do we create them organically as the organization evolves, or do we, sort of look at, sort of very tech forward organizations and look at the structures that they have? So there are a lot of questions, I think that will come up when it comes to sort of this growing talent gap and the new occupations that come with that talent gap. And, cultures have to become more agile. They have to really focus on future-proofing, both people and the organization. And that means that people and culture teams need to be equipped with the right type of strategies. And they also have to, really be digitally focused, which means that they have to be digitally savvy, right? So it is probably, I think what we're going to see, the same way that boards are shifting towards having having IT savvy or technology savvy directors, right? I think we're going to see people and culture departments that start integrating digitally savvy people who come from outside of people management, but who understand innovation, who understand agility, and who understand, sort of how to create these hybrid experiences, how to create these new occupations. And I think there's going to be, sort of like a rubbing of minds in terms of how do we build, digitally focused recruitment and retention strategies, right? So one of the biggest recruiters in the world just announced, or recruitment engines, they own Glassdoor and a couple of other big platforms, and they announced that they're going to phase out CVs, right? And that CVs are no longer going to play a role in recruitment, right, on their platforms, which means that they are going to probably push CVs out for good, right, and create other types of data points that allow you to recruit, right, which a lot of organizations are already using on platforms like LinkedIn. Where you don't necessarily sort of, look at the CV, but you look at specific data points in terms of the experience, in terms of job titles, in terms of things that they've done in the past, education, and things like that. And it's sort of like still the information that's on the CV, but it's data points that allow you to filter much better, that allow you to sort of really drill down much better and find a talent that fits better, right? I also think that digital retention strategies are going to become very important, where you really start thinking about how do you future-proof your team, how do you make sure that people stay, how do you build that culture, how do you build that innovation into your organization, where these new occupations sort of evolve and emerge almost organically, and people are staying because they know that we are at the forefront of innovation. So in terms of recommendations, it's really about reevaluating your working conditions, your policies, and any rigid structures that you may have when it comes to people and culture. Really looking at how do you build a brand that attracts talent, right? And the things that attract talent today are flexibility, value add, alignment and values, learning and growth opportunities. And a lot of the times, these things are more important than what people get paid. Employee experience, right, is just as important as customer experience. You really need to start thinking about how do you create a great employee experience that also helps solidify your culture, that helps attract the right type of talent, and how do you communicate that as well, right? So there's a big role that digital marketing plays in attracting the right type of talent and really showcasing the employee experience within your organization and the culture that you have, to make sure that you get a match. You also need to invest in building a sustainable talent pipeline by investing in giving junior talent opportunities to get experience and grow. So I think there's a really big need to invest in internship and graduate program, by any organization across board, especially when it comes to talent that is focused on digital, whether it is digital marketing or digital transformation. There's a huge talent shortage, and because it's an employees market and people can take global opportunities, we'll continue to have that talent shortage, which means that we need to invest in grooming, right? So no one wants to hire junior talent normally because they're like, oh, then I need to train them. When I train them, they will run away. But we have to invest in it. It needs to become an investment center and not sort of seen as a cost point, right? I think it's really important. Learning and development also has to be driven by innovation and our future-proofing strategies, which means that it's no longer, sort of important to say, oh, we send these people on some trainings, but really looking at how is the organization evolving? How is the digital strategy evolving? How is our, culture and how is the team evolving? What are the new roles that these people need to know? And how is technology evolving, right? And what is the knowledge that they require? So learning and development has to become an integral part of your organization, and not just to check boxes, but to really future-proof your organization. And obviously the people and culture, or HR teams, are going to drive this, right? But a lot of the time, their own structures, as well as the people within the teams, are not really digitally savvy enough to really understand how to drive learning and development, how to drive digital recruiting, how to drive building an innovation culture and things like that. So it's really important to also think about how do you future-proof your people and culture team. And then there's obviously continuous training that helps do that, right? So that training has to be specific to your people and culture leaders specifically, as well as the teams that, that work under them. And this, again, is like any other training, really. It has to be seen as an investment, not a cost center, because your organization is going to be nothing without, digitally savvy people within it. So you have to really invest in talent. And with that, I'm going to come to the end of our trends. If you would like to stay up to date with trends and insights for executives and business owners, we have a publication that we publish bi-weekly called The Digital Plug, which is a combination of pieces that we write, as well as, sort of invitations to learning opportunities, as well as global news, trends, and updates from different publications that we read here at Futuresoft. So if you would like to be part of this, we're also going to put the link in the chat so that you can just click on it and sign up. And with that, I would say a huge thank you for your time and for your attention. And you can ask any questions that you may have in the chat. Okay, so we have one question in the chat, and the question is to share thoughts on how to drive content through partnerships, right? So if you also have questions and you would like to ask, you know, by unmuting yourself, you can raise your hand and then you can unmute yourself. So in terms of driving, you know, your content marketing through partnerships, I think it's really about thinking about who do I share a target audience with, but who am I not competing against, right? Where is their synergy? What are the platforms that have the right type of audience that I am looking to engage with or educate, right? So for example, like Futuresoft, we have a content partnership with Lionesses of Africa, which is a blog and magazine platform that is focused on female entrepreneurs across the continent, right? So in order for us to reach our target audience, which is, you know, mainly business owners and executives, we share our content on that platform, right? So that gives us distribution and increases our reach by about 20,000 reads a week, right? So we would never have that reach out by ourselves. The platform requires highly professional and really good content around digital. So, you know, it's sort of a win-win partnership for us. So it's really about thinking about where do you place your content, who is the content for, how relevant is the content. And there are a lot of both global and local publications that are looking for contributors that can contribute content that are ready to, and this content has to be non-salesy, right? So it has to just be content that is focused on thought leadership, on educating your consumer. It has to be content that, you know, also makes a lot of sense for the platform to put out there because they then look good, right? So really thinking about that is important. Okay, so we have another question here. Okay, how does a financial service firm leverage the metaverse and NFTs? So I think that there are many ways of doing that. Especially when we think about, you know, technologies like DeFi, I think there we're going to see more and more financial service companies really, you know, sort of dive into that decentralized finance world. And you can, you know, sort of message me offline or email me later so that I can send you some resources around DeFi. But I also think that when it comes to loyalty, as well as tokenization, right? In financial services, you have many different sort of categories, but one of the things that we're seeing, especially around asset management and investment, right, is that investment and asset management are being tokenized, which means that you no longer need to own something wholly, right? So let's say property, for example. I don't need to own the entire piece of land in order to invest in it. I can invest into a fraction of it, right? A lot of that technology is blockchain based. A lot of that technology is going to be have a huge metaverse play where you can probably buy metaverse land and own physical land. You know, so it's really about thinking about how do you create value for your stakeholders, for your target audience? How do you engage them? What does the new ownership structures of the future really look like? Because I think those are also really going to change, and the things that people will find valuable are changing as well. So I think as financial institutions, right? So I mean, when you think about insurance, right? You can then start thinking about what are the sort of insurance types that you can offer in a tokenized manner. What role can NFTs play in that, just to sort of gamify some of this as well. Okay, we have another question here. How can a professional service firm measure impact of digital marketing, especially when most of the services are offered to B2B? Okay, so B2B is obviously, a really hard segment to sort of play in, especially when it comes to digital marketing. But this is where your content marketing really plays the biggest role, and where you really need to think about, how do I create lead generation, right? Through, for example, hybrid experiences. So can we create a webinar where we get people to sign up, where we ask people to put in their contact details, and we maybe ask some additional questions, right? So anyone who signed up to this session today knows that we ask about company size, we ask about revenue, we ask about how many people work in your organization, we ask about the sector that you work in, we ask about your position, right? That allows us to segment our database. It allows us to really think about who are the people who attended today, especially if they're not from our immediate network, not from our client base, right? What are the things that they need? So we ask questions around where they are in the strategy journey. We ask questions around what are the needs that they have. We ask questions around whether they would like a free consultation, right? We're selling professional services as well, right? Digital services are professional services. And we need to figure out, how do we, drill down to ensuring that we have enough data to really understand, does this person who attended match our ideal client profile, right? So internally, we have an ideal client profile with specific data points that tells us this person or this company can A, afford our services, B, is in the right state of mind to, sort of go on this digital journey, and C, is ready to also invest time, resources, money into that digital journey, right? Once we've established that from the segmentation that we do, then we can now say, okay, these are the 20 people or 20 organizations that we want to engage and offer a webinar, or a free consultation to, for example, right? So, and that it allows us to also tailor the content that we put out subsequently, right? So if we know that the majority of people who were here today are really looking at digital strategy, then we can put out more content around digital strategy. So a lot of it boils back down to your content marketing and really thinking about, what is the content that your consumers or potential clients need in order to make a decision around the services that you provide, right? So if you provide legal services, for example, what do I need to know in order to know that I'm in trouble and I need a lawyer, right, as an organization, right? And what type of organizations am I trying to attract? Am I trying to attract large corporates? Am I trying to attract, small businesses, startups, for example, right? Because the content that you need for each of these, different types of businesses is very different. Who are the stakeholders within the business, right? So you have the executives, but you also have mid-level management, you have junior management, and then you have, really junior entry-level people who still, may come on a webinar like this. They are not decision makers, but they can make recommendations and say, oh, I watched this webinar, it was really great, and we think we should talk to this organization for our digital marketing, for example, right? So I think it's really, really important to really think about how you use your content marketing to generate leads, to create value, to also build your digital footprint, right? And what formats you put that content in order to make it easily consumable, in order to also push your executives in terms of thought leadership and executive profiling, and in order to be able to repurpose it into micro content as well, right? So those are, I think content marketing for me is really the most important digital strategy when it comes to B2B marketing, right? But thinking about the right type of content, the format of the content, the angle of the content, and then also collecting as much data and segmenting as much out of your database and out of the leads that you generate. I hope that's helpful. Okay, then we have another question here that says, what would be the best way for blog posts to be more visible? So I think I mentioned this already in terms of content partnerships. So building content partnerships with organizations that are non-competing, but that have a reach and that are going to reach your target audience. Everyone is struggling and looking for content. So if you have really high quality content, these partnerships are usually fairly easy to secure, and a lot of the time at no actual cost because they're mutually beneficial, right? Then there's obviously also making sure that you ensure that your content is really optimized for search intent, right? So what are people searching for so that you can drive organic traffic as well? And really thinking about how do I make sure that I understand the search intent that this piece is, sort of for, right? Are you looking to make a transaction? Are you selling something? Are you looking to just give information, right? And what is the actual user or consumer really looking for? And then there's obviously promoting content and also distributing your blog post content as bite-sized content across different channels, right? So you could post it as a full-length long-form article on LinkedIn, but then you would probably on Instagram, maybe make it a swipe post. On Facebook, maybe, make it a carousel post with maybe a little bit longer content that you would put on Instagram. You may, decide to say, okay, you know what, we're going to launch a podcast where we're going to discuss what we've talked about in the blog post, so that you then drive people from, oh, I listened to this podcast and they were talking about this blog post and it was really interesting, to, I need to go and read that blog post because I don't understand everything that they talked about in the podcast, right? Or in the audio recording or video recording or whatever it is, right? So there are many ways of, sort of driving traffic to your blog posts. And this is why the distribution strategy behind your content is really key, and really thinking about what role can also people within the organization play in distributing this content. If everyone in the organization shares it within their network, right? And when we say network, not just I've reposted it on LinkedIn, on Instagram, but I've sent it to people on WhatsApp. I've sent it to people via email. I've really thought about who would this content be beneficial for, and who should I share this with, right? And then doing that. And then there obviously also, in terms of WhatsApp and, Telegram, there are a lot of sort of very, huge communities that are also looking for content. So can I join any of these communities and share my content within those communities? So those are some ways that you can explore. Should augmented reality be used by all retail businesses? I think what is really important is to really sort of think about, what am I trying to achieve here? And how beneficial is it to use the technology, right? So remember I said the technology is secondary and the strategy is what really drives it and informs the technology that you use. So it's really important to really think about, what am I trying to achieve, right? So for example, there's a website called Etsy, which is a marketplace for, sort of handmade things. A lot of small mom and pop shops are on that platform selling their products, a lot of it handmade, a lot of it, really intricate arts and crafty type of things, a lot of art. And they have an augmented reality app that allows you to place things that you buy on Etsy into your home and see how the art looks on the walls, how, a hand-woven rug would look on your floor, right? Those are ways of ensuring that people can experience your products, right? Real time in their homes, and, sort of just get a much deeper connection to that, right? Because if I see a picture, I may not necessarily know, oh, this is what it looks like, but if I'm able to use an app and, sort of project it into my space, or onto my body in terms of wearing a particular dress or carrying a bag, right? Then that experience will make me purchase much faster, because it's almost like going into the store, right? So it's really thinking about, what do you want to achieve, and also being very aware that it is an investment. And you need to make sure that you have consumers that are ready for these experiences, so that you have adopters who are going to drive this, that you have a strategy behind driving the adoption as well. A lot of the time, we think that, oh, we'll build it and people will come, but the truth is, you build it, no one comes because no one knows about it, only you. So you need to build it and you need to market it in order for people to really start embracing it, right? So there has to be a really big, sort of integrated marketing communication strategy around how do I then push this AR experience that I've created into the mainstream for people to get really excited about it. Can I have a campaign that at particular places within Lagos, for example, you have, sort of QR codes that people can scan, and then they see particular products that I have, or, integrations into existing, I don't know, statues or fountains or whatever it is, right? Those are the type of augmented reality experiences that are really exciting because they're so experimental, and they also are very exciting, and because they're exciting, they become highly shareable, right? And people want to talk about them. So I hope that answers the question. I don't know the specifics of your brand, but just really thinking about what is my intent behind it, what am I trying to achieve. Are there any other questions? All right, if there are no other questions, please feel free to email us. Please feel free to DM us across any of our platforms. Please feel free to reach out to us on any of the our digital channels. We're happy to answer any other questions. We're also going to share the recording of this Lunch and Learn session, and we are also going to make the slides available to anyone who registered and is interested in sort of accessing the slides. So just give us a few days and we'll have all the content ready for you guys. And please, share it. I think there are a lot of people who could benefit from, sort of getting some information about the trends that we're looking at in 2022. So thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for your time. I know we went over the hour by about 30 minutes, but thank you for your patience and thank you for listening. And thank you for attending our Lunch and Learn. And we'll hope to see you again in 2 weeks. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Ma, for the session. It was really exciting.
Great. Thank you, everyone.